I noticed that the dude in the car was a Miami Cuban. I was like, said Donald Trump needs to finish the job.
I love this. He's literally doing accents to mock this Cuban guy who was driving his Uber. This is the progressive working class champion. Checking in on the internet for today, because there's always some dumb going down on whatever website, but Hasan Piker, Hasanabi, whatever you want to call him, the left-wing streaming star and socialist, he's participating in this left-wing trip to Cuba, which of course has an authoritarian, essentially communist socialist regime, and he just is visiting as part of this group, and there's so much about it that's so almost beyond parody and absurd, and of course being roasted already, that we've got to discuss it. So here's a headline from the New York Post. Tone-deaf radicals flock into Havana, staying in five-star hotels while island in crisis. Quote, mockery of the Cuban people. Hundreds of tone-deaf lefty radicals flocked into Havana this weekend to meet with Communist Party officials, staying in luxury hotels and traveling in air-conditioned buses as the rest of the island grapples with a worsening economic crisis that starved it of electricity, food, water, and medicine. The Nuestra America convoy sent socialists from North America and Europe to Cuba by air, sea, and land under the guise of handing out 20 tons of humanitarian aid to protest the United States oil blockade on Cuba. So here's the thing. You could debate the sanctions on Cuba. I'll be the first to admit that's not something that I know enough about to offer a super firm conclusion or analysis on. But there's just something so out of touch about these people. Like Hasan, people have already pointed this out. He's rolling up to Cuba with his $600 shirt, his expensive bougie glasses, and all his luxury gear, streaming and making content in a hotel that has power while most of the island is a blackout. It's just like, I don't know. I get that they're ostensibly trying to help, but that's not like what mission work looks like. Like, I know some people, I actually have dear family members who've done mission work, and I'm like blown away. They go stay and in safe and clean conditions, sure, but they're essentially roughing it, and they're staying in impoverished places, and they're staying with local families. They're sleeping in Cuba, when they go to do mission work there, they sleep on the floors of churches with like sleeping bags, and yet they're in this like bougie hotel that's lit up like a Christmas tree while everything around it is dark, and they're streaming and making content and doing collabs, and I don't know, that comes off really tone deaf to me. Anyway, here's more from the Post. The convoy includes Mayor Zohran Mamdani ally and influential streamer Hasan Piker, who recently went on a Beijing-sponsored propaganda trip to Havana, where he broadcast to his 1.6 million Instagram followers Saturday with a somehow spotless internet connection and promised to film content. Cuban officials reported an island-wide blackout this week in the embattled communist nation of some 11 million people after President Trump in January threatened tariffs on any nation selling it oil, effectively choking off its energy supply. And here's a quote from a Cuban living in exile in the U.S. While nearly the entire country is suffering from power outages lasting over 20 hours, the left is welcomed with air conditioning and wasteful electricity consumption, slammed Mayra Dominguez, a Cuban living in exile in the U.S. More than 100 homes wouldn't be without power today if the Castro regime didn't spend it on communist propaganda with the international left, Dominguez said. And so what they're talking about here is the fact that Cuba is experiencing rolling blackouts. And there's two causes of this, essentially. One is the U.S. sanctions, right? They've essentially been able to cut off outside oil coming into Cuba, and so they don't have they're able to get some from Russia still, but they're like vastly limited. And the second is that they've had long-standing energy grid problems, and because they have like an old Soviet era, totally dysfunctional socialist built system for their power grid. So that is what it is. I like I said, I'm not really gonna analyze the wisdom of those sanctions or what the strategy or the goal is. That's a conversation for another day. But I think it's kind of diabolical that they would allocate the scarce power they have to the bougie hotel all these influencers are staying at, while the actual Cuban people go without electricity. If their goal was to help make this government look good, the socialist communist regime or whatever, which I think may have been part of their goal, is not working. Because like that's actually a terrible look, not a good look at all. But other than that, they're doing amazing, of course. So there's also the fact that they stayed in this 5-star hotel, and I don't necessarily care except for the power and other things. But like just the fact that they're staying in a 5-star hotel. Okay. I stay in really nice hotels when I travel abroad. Now, of course, I'm not claiming that's for my vacations, not like ostensibly humanitarian work. But what pissed me off was Hasan just straight up lying on his stream and suggesting that like the US government forces him if he's going to go to Cuba to stay in a 5-star hotel. And that is, of course, totally untrue. But here's that clip.
I was saying tourism is the lifeline for the Cuban economy as it stands currently. The government has very limited resources, and the American government makes it illegal for Americans to stay wherever they want when they're in Cuba. They have to stay in what they've declared as 5-star hotels, right? I'm telling you all this because, like, even the 5-star hotels are not like, you know, it's not like it's what the American government has declared 5-star hotels. But regardless, in comparison to the situation on the island, it's prosperity pretty much, and experiencing that dichotomy is like definitely me up. Definitely. Like if I were to ever, I mean not ever, but like I hope to come back, and when I do, I'll probably not abide by the American restrictions.
Well, that would be unwise. Because I honestly think that this government would love to punish you under sanctions, and I would frankly find your tears delicious if you were to do that. But let me try to explain, because I did a little bit of poking into this, like what's really going on here. So essentially, the United States government restricts the ability of Americans to go to Cuba, but you can't just go like, oh, I feel like going on vacation, but you can go under certain conditions. And what they don't allow you to do as an American, the U.S. government, is stay at properties that are essentially like directly or very closely run by or tied to the regime itself. So a lot of they have a list of hotels you're not allowed to stay at because they're literally operated by the government or they're closely connected. And so then you have to stay on hotels that are not on that list. But that doesn't mean you have to stay at a 5-star hotel. That's where he just lies. Like, no, you could stay at one of the cheaper hotels. And more importantly, you can actually, and I looked into this, you could stay in people's homes, right? They have like small casas, like local people, and just pay them directly and they rent out rooms. And it's literally through Airbnb. Like, so there's lots of options. So don't lie to us and say the government of America forces you to stay in 5-star hotels when you're in Cuba. That's just not true. So if you want to defend your choice to stay in a very upscale hotel and defend the apparent choice of the regime to allocate scarce electricity to that hotel for you to do your propaganda live stream, you can do that, I guess. That's a choice. But you can't just lie to us and tell us that, oh yeah, they banned you from staying in an Airbnb. They didn't. That's not true. I looked this up. It's publicly verifiable. There are many options where you can say it is limited. That part is true. There are restrictions on many hotels you cannot go to, but it doesn't mean, oh, you have no choice but to do what you're doing. That is totally dishonest. And then he also had to go and insult, because he can't just, focus on helping people, distributing aid, like, I don't know, any of that. He had to go and insult Cuban exiles in America or second generation Cubans or some of the people who I've known some of them over the years. And it's like, I totally disagree with his characterization, but let's look at this.
Cubans, best people, okay? So kind, so welcoming, just the best, just the absolute best people. Oh my Lord, okay? Not in Miami. Oh, dude, it's the reversal. Actually, literally, like the exact opposite. Like all the good Cubans stayed here, and most of the ones that are crazy just like flew up there. I swear to God. So March and I were about to discuss. We get into Uber last night. March and I are about to discuss that we're gonna be flying to Cuba, like talking about plans, right? And I was like, March, don't say anything. Because I noticed that the dude in the car was a Miami Cuban. I was like, don't, like, I literally went, don't say anything. And then I just asked him, I was like, where are you from? And he's like, oh, Cuba. And I was like, okay. And I just asked him about, like, you know, what his feelings are about what's going on. March actually spat some Spanish at him. Okay. And let me tell you, okay, he said, Donald Trump needs to finish the job.
I love this. He's literally doing accents to mock this Cuban guy who was driving his Uber. This is the progressive working class champion, Hasan Piker. And he's saying that all the Cubans in America who flew, actually, some of them literally fled on rafts. Because you know, whenever it's an amazing socialist paradise, people flee on homemade rafts across ocean. No, and he's saying they're all crazy, and all the Cubans here say they love the government, and they are really happy when our camera crew comes around. Maybe because something bad would happen to them if they spoke up, and maybe the people who have fled and are free to say whatever they want, are maybe have a slightly more accurate version of events. Because if you came to America from Cuba, and you say Cuba's amazing, actually, the regime did nothing wrong, nothing bad's going to happen to you, right? Like if you're here in Miami and you want to become a public advocate as a Cuban immigrant for the Cuban government, or say it's all great and dandy, literally nothing will happen to you. However, if you were a critic inside Cuba, very different story. So the idea that, like, oh, well, the Cubans here all seem so nice and normal, and all those crazy American Cubans in America must just be insane. It's just so belittling to their experiences and to the very valid reasons they may have had to leave Cuba, and to the repression that a lot of the Cuban people have faced at the hands of this regime. He's just so casually insulting and dismissing all these experiences of these people. And it's so uncritical too, just like just accepting what he's being presented with in this carefully staged, managed trip. The same way we talked about this when he went to China, and he's just like, obviously, you should not just accept what the American government version of events and narrative at face value, but you also shouldn't and just totally believe everything they say about countries that are, you know, our adversaries. But you also shouldn't just do the opposite and just become a slot puppet for these foreign regimes. But that seems to be Hasan's modus operandi. And it's not just him. The whole thing really does seem so tone deaf and cringe to me. Like, I support getting help to the Cuban people, of course. I mean, they don't deserve the consequences or ramifications of these policies. It's heartbreaking. But like, these women from Code Pink, which is one of the left-wing groups organizing this trip, they painted a mural there. And this is going to change this is just a real game changer, guys. Look at this and try not to laugh.
I am helping to leave a gift and vision of humanidad. This is the mural for humanity, and it's going to have little boats with notes in it of love, and it will, the words will go across all the way to the bird on the other side. There'll be fishes and sea life here, and it's from a poem with artists from all over the United States.
These woke are out of control. What do you mean? They're painting a mural. Oh, well, that's going to fix everything. You know, these people might be starving as they walk by, but at least the white saviors painted them a pretty picture of boats. Like, imagine you are a Cuban who is literally your lights won't turn on. The hospital where your grandparent is a patient it doesn't have electricity because of the failures of the Soviet era socialist grid, and because of the ongoing conflict with America and the sanctions and all this. And you've got these like woke white people here to save the day and bring aid that's just going to get turned over to the government and mostly pilfered. But don't worry, they're painting you a mural. It's just so tone deaf. It's like, I'd rather you, personally, if it was me, I'd rather just you not help than help in this kind of obnoxious way. And they really thought they did their big one too. that's what I love about these people. Like, you almost have to respect the Delulu of it all. It's like they're filming themselves because they think this makes them look good. And that, never beat up on yourself, okay? Always gas yourself up, because there are people out there so much worse than you in every single way who think they're doing amazing. So maybe you could just apply a little bit of that Delulu to yourself and boost your own self-esteem. How about that? Anyway, that's my initial take. There'll probably be more that comes out about all of this, and some of the details are unconfirmed that I haven't gotten into. So maybe there'll be another update later this week on the Cuba propaganda tour from Hasan Piker and all these other lefties. But hopefully not, actually, but I'm sure we will be hearing more out of them, because they seem to have all the electricity and Wi-Fi in the world to make their content. You guys will have to let me know what you think of all of that in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe, and do consider becoming a channel member to support my content. And that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll talk again real soon.